Hello everybody, happy Pride Month. No, I'm not coming out, but I am going to talk about Alan Turing, who's an important icon in the LGBTQ plus community. Alan Turing is rightly celebrated and he has become an icon, but I think he should be considered for much more than just his sexuality. He was many things. The first thing, he was a mathematician. In 1928, David Hilbert, a German, wanted a mechanical method or an algorithm to determine how a mathematical statement could be provable or decided. That's the Entscheidungsproblem. That means problem about how to decide something. And Turing made a considerable contribution to resolving what Hilbert was thinking about. In 1934, Turing graduated with a degree in mathematics from Cambridge University. And then, in 1937, he published his major paper entitled On Computable Numbers with an application to the Entscheidungsproblem. He demonstrated that problems existed for which no algorithmic solution could be found, and his work effectively disproved the Hilbert conjecture. That was the start of his career. During the Second World War, Turing was a code breaker at Bletchley Park, which was otherwise called the X Station, for the Ultra program, which tried to crack, and in fact did crack, the German Enigma code. He worked on naval codes and probably saved many lives during the Atlantic War when ships were crossing from the United States to Great Britain bringing supplies and being torpedoed by the Germans. He went on to become the primary contact for the Americans and computer specialists like Claude Shannon, who worked at Bell Labs. So Turing had a comprehensive knowledge of the British intelligence and code-breaking system. As a result of this work that Turing did during the war, he's known as the father of modern computing. But Turing's idea was not a practical idea initially about how computers work. It was a theoretical construct. And then in 1950, he published a paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And it was this paper that people have taken forwards to develop the idea of the Turing test, which is how you can measure intelligent behaviour indistinguishable from that of a human. That's the basic metric for whether a system is artificially intelligent at the level of a human being. After the war, up to 1947, Turing still worked for the British government in a senior position, and he turned his hand to more practical designs of a real-world computer and the detailed design of a machine that worked on the basis of storing its programs. But he got bored with that, and so he returned to academic life. He went to Cambridge first for a sabbatical, and he wrote an important paper called Intelligent Machinery. But then in 1948, he was appointed reader in mathematics in the University of Manchester. And later on, he became the deputy director of the Computing Machine Lab. So he was working for quite some time after his war work with the Ultra program as an academic. And in 1952, published what's effectively a masterwork called The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis. Morphogenesis is how a living organism develops a shape based on its genome. So Turing was doing extremely important and high-level academic work into the early 1950s. Also, he wasn't a one-dimensional character. He was a runner, and I suppose if he wanted to define himself, he would probably have said that he's an athlete. He was a competitive long-distance runner, and he used to run 60 miles sometimes from Oxford to London just for a meeting. He was a remarkable man. He'd go on a 40-mile run just to relax himself. He was a competitive rower as well and rowed for Cambridge University. So if you look at Turing overall, he was not simply somebody who was defined by his sexuality. He was a remarkable mathematician. He was a war hero. He saved lives by cracking the Enigma code during World War II. And he was a senior academic at Manchester University. Unfortunately, things turned against him. He had never made a secret of his sexuality. It wasn't something that defined him, and none of his friends, colleagues, or employers had ever made an issue of the fact that Alan Turing was gay. But in 1952, his house was burgled, and in his discussion with the police about what may have happened, he confessed to having a relationship with a young man. And such were the times that the police charged him with indecent behaviour, to which he pleaded guilty. And tragically, he was sentenced to chemical castration with a synthetic estrogen. It wasn't something that upset him. It's important to understand that Alan took it with remarkable calm. In fact, he chose it against a short period of imprisonment, and he regarded it with something akin to amusement, almost as an experiment. It was not something that depressed him. But 2 years later, in June 1954, he was found dead in bed from cyanide poisoning. The police investigation was cursory, lasted a few hours, and the doctor saw him late at night, and within a day or so the coroner's verdict was suicide. And the coroner said, well, what would you expect of somebody with his sexual proclivities? Now that verdict has been challenged. His mother never believed it, his friends never believed it, his employers didn't believe it, but that verdict of suicide has stayed with him. There we are, that's Alan Turing, an extremely important man, but a man of many different parts and many different talents. And I think he needs to be considered as this whole person and not defined simply by being an icon based on his sexuality. If you want to read his biography, the definitive biography is by Dr. Andrew Hodges, who's a fellow in mathematics at Oxford University. It's a book called Alan Turing, The Enigma. It's a must-read, a very detailed, fact-based biography of Alan. My own book, Gateway to Gandamak, book 1, and my book is fiction. So my book has a different take on the mystery of Alan's death, because I don't believe it was suicide. I think there was another explanation for it, and I've explored that on a fictional basis in my book, Gateway to Gandamak. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and see you next week.